So we're now on, we'll reconvene, and we're on item 13, the housing forward work. Right. Welcome, team. Now, Jack, are you going to do an intro, or you there to...
Straight over to Christina.
Did you? Lovely. Okay, thanks, Christina.
Sure.
We're in your hands.
Okay, so let me just grab this first. The purpose of this item is to discuss the Housing Forward Work Program. And this is a response to your resolution from the Council's Chief Economist's report around housing supply, choice and affordability, which you discussed in October. And what I'll do is outline some of the preliminary findings from the work that we've gone and done. And we are seeking agreement to the proposed direction for 2016-17 around the Housing Forward Work Program. So a bit of context, housing is complex. We've had lots of discussions about it already this morning, and it's a challenge for high growth cities internationally. There's no singular solution, clearly. It's a national issue. It's a key central government focus. Council has a broad placemaking role, so while not explicitly targeted at the housing market and efficiency and regulation, we do have a role that we play. And that we are also largely pursuing what we can within the current financial and legislative parameters. So what I'd like to do is just direct your attention to the attachments. So there's attachment A, which is the large A3, looks like this.
It's really hard to read. Can't read it.
So I think the key thing to keep in mind is that it's not necessarily about all the detail, although we can make that available to you again. I know it was at the workshop, but we can make that available to you. But it's more about all of the work that is currently underway. So to get an understanding of what's going on, we mapped it across the Auckland Plan priority areas. So those are across supply, choice, quality, and affordability. We've also added an inform align category because we think there are a number of things that we do that live there as well. The stocktake includes projects, activities, does not include fora or steering groups, and it also does not include activities central government's doing on its own. So it's what we are doing either on our own or together with central government. And what's clear is that there's significant work underway in the housing area. While Council's interventions are primarily, as you'll see, supply-based, they also cover the other areas. And there are some significant infrastructure investment and delivery programs underway that you're aware of. So it's critical to keep in mind that these will be happening. So whether it's with Auckland Transport, Watercare, Housing New Zealand, there will be a lead-in time around some of these. What I'd like to do now is draw your attention to the second attachment. So that's the one that looks like this. So what we've done is, after looking at all of the activities that Council is currently undertaking around housing, we've then had a look at all of the options that the Chief Economist put forward in that report. And we've looked at where we can, probably should put it forward. What we've done is we've noted again that a lot of, and you can see that the green means that we are already doing it in part or full. The yellow are activities that we're not currently doing. And then the orangish color is not explored further at this time due to the nature of the recommendation. Either it's not the right time or we simply don't have the tools to do it. And the other color, the darker color, the sort of gray color, is that it's not currently supported by Auckland Council position or policy. So we of course wouldn't recommend going ahead with that. So what we've done is we've looked across all the things we're doing and the recommendations to see where there might be opportunities. So we also want to note that when the report was released, it was October of 2015, so a number of things may have moved on since then. And what we'd like to do with this in mind is to recommend that we continue and complete the current substantive program of work underway across the council group, that we get agreement on the proposed direction, so that is to go forward and look at other tools. So in addition to what the chief economist has said and recommended, that we look at some other approaches, tools, or ways that we can address housing in general. So we think that we're probably largely doing about 80 to 90% of what we can be doing, but there might be another 10 to 20% of things that we could also look at. So we see that in exploring these new tools or ideas and approaches, that it will require engagement with central government and other parties to be able to do that. So it might be council alone, but it probably will also be partnering. That's it.
Thank you.
Questions?
So can I just say, I'm aware that the copy you have in your pack is pretty fudgy, so those of you who, the workshop will have an original one, but what we'll do is get one up to your desks, so you've got one, because this is what we'll report back on over time, so we'll just make sure you've got an original one that's clearer.
I think we might need to do it over a couple of pages. Just
My
so it's
apologies, I
legible.
only saw this when I came this morning, so we can certainly distribute that to you and make it available.
That's great. Councillor Walker.
Yeah, just got a couple of questions. I just see under grey, for example, reduce restrictions on small buildings, and I think you mentioned grey was not supported by a position or a policy. I don't quite comprehend that. I mean, I would have thought it was still something useful to pursue, particularly given that it's really around advocacy with government.
Right.
And I know from experience of people I'm talking about that it would have quite a significant effect.
Right, so what we've done is we've talked with those who are working around whatever the detail is in here, and what we've been advised is that we would have to also look at the Building Act around this. So there are planning rules already set under the Building Act, and it could potentially be that it would be appropriate under the RMA, but we wouldn't do anything that would necessarily undermine the Building Act. So given a number of things underway at the moment, we wouldn't necessarily, or the recommendation is that that wouldn't be where we would focus our energies.
Okay, so just in terms of the explanation you've given, is that sort of explanation available for what underlies these positions that you suggested?
Sure. What we've done is we've had conversations with all of council, so staff across council, and of course the council group, so the CCOs as well, Panuku, and this is the advice that we have been given. So it's based on what is already council policy, so it will live in a number of places already.
Councillor Walker, I think what you're asking is, can you actually see that detail? Sure, we can get that to you. There's a section on each one of those that explains to what degree we're already doing work in that or not. Just to clarify, so what you're seeing there is as of, say, today, that's where we are. That's the areas that we either have already done stuff or that we're in the process of doing it. That's not suggesting that we shouldn't do it. That is just saying we are not doing it at the moment. And as Christina said a bit earlier on, looking at where we might go over the next year, it's probably fair to say that in terms of the legislation that we operate under, as a council, and if you look at what we've done in the past and you look what is happening at the moment, we have probably gone as far as we can in terms of housing within the bounds that we can. There is not a great deal more that we can do within that, and that is why we're suggesting it is probably time that we maybe start looking beyond that. There might be all kinds of things beyond what is allowable today for us as a council, but that doesn't mean there aren't good things that can be done, and that's what we're asking. Let's finish off this work that you see on that A3, but let's also spend some time over the next year looking at all kinds of things that might be possibilities where we can actually make some gains. What those are, I don't particularly have any idea at this stage until you start really looking at these things. And as we discover them, we can bring them to the committee. But that's really what we're asking. Nothing really should be off the table. We should be looking at everything.
So, in respect of what you're looking at here from us, is this simply a sort of status report? You're not seeking endorsement around this at this point?
No, because I suppose in many ways...
When I say endorsement around this, I'm referring to where you're at across this table here.
All right, well, these are actually the chief economist's recommendations, so around what council can do itself or in partnership with others, or what we can advocate to. So none of this is, I mean, some of these things obviously are on the table, and I think that's what we're saying, is that the green is what the chief economist said we should look at, and in fact we are looking at a lot of that, which is heartening because we have moved on a bit since October. But it's those other things that could be potentially looked at, yeah.
Councillor
Madam Chair.
Penrose and Councillor Clow.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Probably mine's just in relation to the item this morning, as we're talking about in this item, as we're talking about housing supply and choice and affordability. And I've just had confirmation in regards to the LTP and what was in the LTP for housing for the elderly, and thank you for the Chief Financial Officer for that. And that's 3.5 million annually. Over the life of the 10-year plan, it's 35 million. And 864,000 for the homeless in the LTP, which the mover and the second this morning, Councillor Casey and Watson, didn't support. So I just want to put that on the table, Madam Chair.
It wasn't support.
Can you
it was not in
repeat that,
support of the
please?
process. You can
I
go
didn't
on
catch
it.
that.
If it gives you pleasure, you
Okay.
just go right ahead.
Could I have those words
Okay.
repeated, because my name was mentioned,
Hang
but
on.
I didn't catch it?
It's okay.
Councillor
No,
Watson.
we were just,
Councillor
we
Watson.
were just I think
He's
Councillor
not here right
Penrose
now.
It's about the LTP.
point has been made. Councillor Clow.
Oh dear. Oh dear, oh dear. What a day. What another day.
Another day in paradise.
Christina and Jacques, at the last presentation of this, I did ask, that we go back and talk to Panuku, and I gave New Lynn as an example, because Panuku, in its three categories, transform, unlock and support, it did have a few sitting there that they were going to keep on working on. One was the Wynyard Quarter and one was New Lynn, and there were a couple of others. And you briefly told me that Panuku thought the work had, you inferred maybe the work had all been done there just as we met on the stairs. Because I'm looking at the executive summary on this report, and I'm looking at 6 and 7. That's there, and I'm really struggling to think, are we actually doing everything at the moment to finish off projects? And I'm going to give New Lynn as the example, because, and the Deputy Mayor is more than up on with the play on that issue, but for example, through the unitary plan, we have Auckland Transport trying to uplift the designation for a road that was recommended. Indeed, there was some legacy money, which has disappeared now, by Waitakere City. And yet, over in Dean's area, and Dean wasn't aware, we've got some of his staff that are fighting the uplifting of that designation. So you're going, well, this is a bit like the bad old days where, kind of, so, we had, it was everyone against the ARC. But we're not finishing things, and I know, and Deputy Mayor Hulse is more than aware we haven't finished, but we're so close to finishing, but it's like, let's move on to something else and we don't worry about that, it's all done. But it isn't done, and I'm saying, are we, even within the council itself, and then the greater council family, I'm not sure that we are tying all the laces up and finishing things, dotting the I's and crossing the T's to actually ensure we unlock those last things. And we've had that previous presentation, and sorry, New Lynn is one of the ones that's actually pretty advanced, 2,400 houses in this one development or something like that. And everyone's moving on it, so it's all resolved. The developer doesn't think it's resolved. the local board doesn't think it's resolved. I'm the local councillor, I don't think it's resolved. And I know there are other examples around, wearing my bigger hat as a councillor for the whole of Auckland. There are a few others where we're not finishing them off and we're rushing forward. And as I say, I stress on the executive summary 6.6 and 7 there, I don't know whether we're fulfilling that.
As you know, you've raised this with me, and Dean has picked this up and is going the Newland example. As you know, also that's a budgetary constraint specifically, which is being worked through. This is the forward work program. I get the line as a challenging one. We can't document everything, but that's not a signal that that's just been ignored. I think we just need to, the purpose of this is to focus on what we can do materially looking ahead, and we will follow up on the New London examples.
I want to stress, it's not just New London I'm talking
I know,
about.
I
There's
understood
several
the
others
example.
that were sitting there in the support category, that Panuku's three-tiered approach, that were kind of things that were almost done, but they were still sitting there, and yet we're kind of thinking we've moved on.
No.
And, infrastructure's there, we're almost there, and as I say, that's one example of several around.
So we'll continue to pick it up, but they're not forgotten.
Yeah, and I think councillor Clow, you have raised this, and I think our FaceTime with Panuku through the CCO committee, I think, is a good chance to just really start to